Seguimos entonces con la siguiente ponencia: el riesgo cibernético en el transporte de carga, retos y oportunidades de aseguramiento, con la presentación de Mr. Anthony Cowie, SVP, Head and Americas Ocean Marine en Swissôtel, New York. Se graduó en la Universidad de Richmond, comenzó su carrera en 1990 en Prudential Insurance, ahora Everest. Posteriormente, con gran éxito, creó operaciones en suscripción de Marine y aviación en AXA Re US y Ace Tempest Re US. Se unió en Swiss Re en 2004 y actualmente es el jefe de reaseguro marítimo para las Américas, que hace parte de la división de Marine Global de Swiss Re. Actualmente es miembro activo de la Junta del Instituto Americano de Aseguradores Marítimos y expresidente de la Junta Directiva en el Sindicato del Seguro de Calidad del Agua. Es un orador frecuente en temas de seguros marítimos, reaseguros, ha sido entrevistado y destacado en varias publicaciones de la industria. Bienvenido, Mr. Anthony.
There we go. Sorry. Thank you again for the invitation. Of course, when you work with Erica and she asks you to do something, you know how hard it is to say no. It's great to be back at Alsum and talking to you again. If you were here in 2015, you might remember this presentation. I'm starting with this slide from 2 years ago because a lot has happened in the past 2 years. And I wanted to start here because we have this nice picture of the boats. It's kind of a happy picture, and things have definitely changed over the time. And so we now have a much darker story to tell today, unfortunately. There are a couple of bright spots, but unfortunately the cyber world has gotten a lot worse. There's been a lot more incidents. There's a lot more danger out there. Fortunately, there's more awareness too, and we're going to talk about that, but unfortunately it's not a great story to tell so far. The things we want to think about today and to come away with is, I want you all to think about, how is cyber relating to your policies today? Are you providing cover? Are you not providing cover? Some of you will come away from this speech today thinking, wow, this is really scary and terrible, and I don't mean to scare you, and you may not want anything to do with it. Others will see opportunity here, and you may find a way to provide cover, and this may be something that's interesting to you and an area of growth. So let's go through with it. So table of contents. So I'm calling this speech Then and Now. So looking at what we had from 2015 with updates and expansions. And so anything new I've put in blue. So the new stuff you'll see in blue, and those are the changes. We want to start with a working definition of cyber risk so we understand it. That has changed over the past 2 years. It's evolved. We'll go into that. We'll talk about what the exposures are, how big are they, what's going on, and what do we need to be concerned about. We'll look at what is going on with insurance policies. We'll look at it from the reinsurance side too. And then we'll talk about how the maritime insurance industry and the ship owners are dealing with it, the regulators. And we'll also touch on the non-marine market too, because that's also very important to think about what's going on in the P&C side. And then we'll talk a little bit about the future. I'm going to also apologize. There's a lot of words on these slides. There's not a lot of good pictures for cyber. You can only look at so many ones and zeros and hooded hackers, and it gets a little boring. So it is a lot of words. We're not going to read them all. But I would ask that, think about looking at it afterwards. If you have questions, I'm here to help, and Swiss Re and others in the market know a lot about this too. So the idea is that we learn more and that we continue to ask questions and understand where we're going with this. Okay. So cyber risk, the working definition. So this has evolved, and I am going to read from this one because it's important. So cyber risk has been defined as the risk arising from the storage, use, computation, and or transmission of electronic data. So this cyber risk, it can be either malicious, bad, which is where hackers or bad actors play a part, or it can absolutely be inadvertent, that there was just some bad code written and at some point it blows up. So for our purposes, we're really concerned about the malicious cyber risk, and that's the main topic of the speech. And then at the bottom, there's something to think about. For malicious cyber risk to arise, there has to be vulnerabilities somewhere in your system. So either the IT system itself has a weakness that can be taken advantage of. So that might be a problem with the code, or what we call the operational technology. And that could be anything from a laptop or a computer on a vessel or in an office that just has a USB drive that someone can inadvertently plug in an infected zip drive, or it could be as innocent as someone answering an email, a phishing email, and responding to it. So the important thing is that we need to look at these vulnerabilities and understand them to be able to understand these risks and someday maybe underwrite them. So when we talk about the bottom part with the vulnerabilities, and you also need not only the vulnerabilities, but you need the bad actors. You need someone out there who is interested in causing harm or stealing or causing physical damage. And unfortunately, in the world today, we have that all over the place. Okay. How big is the cyber exposure? So on the black from the 2015 presentation, we saw the estimate of the cost of worldwide cybercrime 2 years ago, $400 billion. That was sort of the cost of cybercrime. And they put a range around it. We have now, if we jump down a little bit, Hiscox is now putting it at $450 billion. So in 2 years, we have a $50 billion increase in the estimated amount of cybercrime, which is it's an awful lot of money. When we look at what companies were spending to combat cybercrime 2 years ago, $80 billion. 2 years later, $90 billion. So a 12.5% increase. I don't think many people are getting 12.5% rises in their premiums over those past 2 years. So this was a good business to be in if you were selling cybersecurity. It's absolutely a growth area. The last bit is incredibly scary. So I did found this, it was in Forbes back in July, and someone wanted to look at what they considered the true cost of cybercrime. So that's not just the direct losses, but also looking at the indirect. So the value of the companies that are attacked, what happens to their share price before and after attack? How much money and market cap has been lost? So they look at all these other things, and this guy estimated it somewhere around $3 trillion, with a T, trillion, in 2015, and thinking that it's going to go up to $6 trillion, and this is annually, by 2021. These are just mind-boggling numbers, and if you go in and look at the post, he actually goes into some detail as to how he got there. I'm not sure if they're correct or not, but I did think the magnitude was important to point out to get, hopefully to get everyone's attention. Looking at what we see, and by the way, you can go and Google cyber losses and find mountains of information. When you're doing a speech like this, you're always afraid that you're not going to have enough information. I had way too much, so it was tricky to boil it all down. I want to talk about the Equifax event in the United States. So what was lost, and Equifax is a big credit monitoring service. So it was people's names, their social security numbers, their driver's license, their address, their date of birth, every bit of personal information these companies have so that they can evaluate people's credit. So anyone with a credit card pretty much has an Equifax rating. So I was personally impacted in this event. You were able to go onto a website, put your some information in, and it could tell you if your data was lost or not, and lucky me, I lost my data, or Equifax lost it for me. So what are they doing about this? Equifax is now giving the 143 million people in the United States 1 year of free credit monitoring. This is something they usually charge, I think, $12 a month for. So now 143 million people are eligible for free credit monitoring. So that actually has a cost for Equifax. So when you think about that $3 or $6 trillion number from the other page, that might not be that far off, because this is something Equifax could have sold, but now they have to provide for free. Their reputation has been destroyed by this event. Their share price has fallen. The other thing is, if you look at the bottom, this happened on July 29th, and Equifax did not let the market or the public know about it for over a month. In the meantime, allegedly, Equifax executives sold shares, a lot of shares. So there's now an investigation going on with the SEC because they knew as soon as it became public, obviously their stock price was going to tank. So there's a lot of issues that go on when we start looking at these breaches that happen. These are sort of a top 10 list. We got some hits here. In June 2017, we had the Petya, Netya, and GoldenEye. These are the ransomware, malware attacks. We're going to talk about this one a little bit later. This is the one where Maersk was involved. In May, we had WannaCry. That was a ransomware attack. We're going to discuss ransomware a little bit later, too. This has become the most popular type of attack now, and it pays off the most for the criminals. The CIA in the United States, they had some data stolen, which you would think the CIA would be able to control their information. But that ended up on WikiLeaks. Yahoo, over 3 years, massive breaches. All 3 billion Yahoo accounts were compromised. So if you had a Yahoo email address, odds are very good that someone somewhere in the world could be looking at your email. Equifax, again, this was back in 2016. W-2s are the U.S. salary taxation forms. They also have a lot of personal information. They lost millions of those. But again, if you wanted to, you could go out and find hundreds and hundreds of more examples that are known. But I also want to point out, these are only the reported attacks. Many, many, many attacks do not go reported because you can see from the impact that you might have on your share price. You may not want anyone to know that if you had an incident. So it's often kept secret. We're going to revisit what the thieves are selling. So 2 years ago, we looked at credit card details. They were going at $4 each. They're still going at about $4. New things, Social Security numbers, which were much more difficult to get in the past in the United States, those are now more easily obtained, apparently, and going for about $30. Date of birth, $10. But we want to get to ransomware. So this has become extremely popular. This is where you get that phishing email, you click on the button, and your whole screen freezes up. And you call this number or send a Bitcoin to this address, and you have to pay to get your data back. And so Symantec, who is one of the providers of cybersecurity, is now saying that the average cost of getting your data back has gone from almost $300 in 2015 to well over $1,000 today. And it's funny, I was on the airplane coming down here on United, and they show commercials, and one of the commercials was for Barracuda Networks, and it was how they made a company not have to pay the ransom of the ransomware. So when it gets to the point where you're seeing ransomware in TV commercials, it's time, I think, we really do need to look at this and spend a bit of time on it. Okay, so mariners, should we be concerned? And I'm going to, again, skip to the answer I gave. It's going to come up in a few pages, but it's yes. So if we, these are the old ones. The first one talks about spoofing. Spoofing is still an issue, but when we think about cyber in our definition and exploiting a vulnerability, spoofing really, we should not really think of it as cyber anymore. Spoofing has to be very localized, it requires specialized equipment, and all you are is really distorting the signal of the GPS. So we don't really think of that as cyber that much. It's interesting that there is a theory that those recent collisions in Asia between the US naval vessels and cargo ships, they think there might be spoofing involved, but no one is saying yes or no yet, but the investigations are ongoing. But that could explain how something so big with those kind of experienced people on board hit each other. The middle one, I still have no answer on that. We can't verify that. The hackers and the pirates infiltrating, that we know that those things have happened where LODs have been hacked and changed. So we're going to talk about some new things though. So AP Mahler, Maersk. June 25th, NotPetya was released around the world. So at first it looked like ransomware, but really it was just a malware that it seemed just released to create havoc around the world. And what this malware did was it basically seized the hard drives and made it impossible for them to work. So they were no longer fit for purpose. They had to be physically replaced, reloaded with software. So what happened for Maersk? It shut down 76 shipping terminals around the world, including shutting the port of Los Angeles entirely for a little while. It took 2 weeks to fix it. Maersk estimates somewhere up to $300 million is the cost and the loss. To the best of my knowledge, no claim has been put forward yet, but that was, it did happen. There was an actual dollar amount lost. So the CEO of Maersk has basically said, they told their investors that yes, we had this attack, but all of the applications were just made unavailable for a while. I think he kind of undersold it a little. They pointed out no data was lost, no workers were endangered, the ships operated normally, but for 2 days the affected terminals couldn't move any cargo. So the ships were fine, but the terminals were shut down. So you had basically a delay situation. No physical damage to the ships, but you did have a delay, which, as Torge pointed out, and we also heard in this morning from Javier, it could cause problems all through the supply chain, right? You're going to have delays, you could have refrigerated cargo that had issues. So some of you might be seeing claims somewhere along the line resulting from this delay. Also want to point out, Maersk was only one of 7,000 companies around the world that were hit in this attack. Just one. So this issue was a global problem, and we only heard about the big ones in the news, but 7,000 companies were dealing with this. So revisiting some of the other hits from 2015. Denial of service attacks, yes, absolutely, still an ongoing concern. Trying to hack into wireless systems around the world, yes, still an ongoing concern. The last bit, though, when we talk about the awareness of cyber, here there has absolutely been improvement. Many more people, insurers, the ship owners, the regulators, there's been a whole ton of work done, and people are much more aware of the problem now than they were 2 years ago. So a little bit more on the awareness. So yes, it's gotten better. I'll point out that by June 2017, the second edition of the guidelines on cybersecurity were published by the industry, led by BIMCO. I've put the link down in the presentation if you would like to go and pull it. And then what I think is really great, this is just within the past month or so, the Standard Club has created a cyber awareness video that people can use to help educate their crew. And I'd like if we can roll the video. We may not watch the whole thing, it's 5 minutes, but we'll see a little bit of it. Okay, we're working on it. Okay. There's lots of really scary sound. It's not here yet. Okay, it looks like we don't have the sound. Let's we'll kill it. What it basically is talking about is the vulnerability. Really, the biggest one is us. It is the people involved who are able to fall prey to phishing, and one of the examples I give is blackmail, where a shipping executive got involved in an inappropriate relationship, and then he was blackmailed by a crime syndicate to plug a drive into, and these are actually all taken from actual cases. It's very worthwhile to watch. The link is there in the presentation. But the real thing, and it's not just for mariners, it's really for us and for our employees in insurance companies in every business, that we have to do a better job of making them aware that often the weak link in the security chain is the people. it's more difficult to hack into code than it is for to get one single employee amongst millions to click a button and answer a phishing email and let somebody and open the door for them. So that's the key thing we want to take away from here. Okay, so here's the yes, and then we have the potential exposure list, and I've moved up denial of service and ransomware to the top. So our concerns here are still, is cargo theft via cyber still a concern? Absolutely. Extortion, piracy, and then all the other things. It was true in 15, it's true now. And as I put, the educating people is really the only way and the best way to fight cyber risk and cyber crime in the future. Okay, moving on to the insurance part of it. Is cyber covered under a marine insurance policy? In 2015, we said maybe. In 2017, the answer is still maybe. The big change is that a policy with no exclusion in it now has a name. And we're going to talk more about this, but we now call it silent cyber. I wish I had invented that, but it makes sense. So you haven't excluded it in your all risk policy, you may be covering cyber. And now we call it silent. Because as the market has evolved to provide actual cyber cover, there's a difference. So some people are buying specific cover, and some may or may not have it in their policies. There has been new exclusionary language introduced by the American Institute of Marine Underwriters. It's coming up. It was just about to be introduced into the market in 2015, the last time I spoke, and we have a copy of it for you. Unfortunately, this language has not been very well accepted in the United States. There's very few policies where any underwriter is actually using it. They're still using 380, and we'll get to that in a second. We are seeing cyber writebacks, which are specific writing back of the cover, either deleting the 380 exclusion or by adding some specific language into the policy. And we've seen that often in the energy market, where specific language has been added back to provide cyber cover. But unfortunately, we're seeing now in the hull market where requests are coming in, especially after the Maersk situation, where ship owners are asking to have CL 380 deleted from their hull policy, and unfortunately many underwriters around the world are agreeing to this. I don't think it's a good idea, personally. Also, I don't think anyone's charging any premium for it, which was also something you might want to think about. At the end of the day, the insureds, the insurers, the reinsurers, the brokers, everyone needs to get together and talk about this and figure out a solution, which is, in my opinion, not happening enough yet. There's some talk going on, but no one's actually doing anything. And so we do need to do this. It's a real exposure, and it has to be addressed in a meaningful way, which I don't think is happening yet. Silent cyber. So I'm going to try and summarize an excellent presentation from Willis Re. They call it Silent Cyber Risk Outlook, Decode Cyber Risk. You can go to their website and pull it down. I think it's worth a read. What they're saying is that as specific cyber policies have, become available and more common, especially in the property casualty world, insurers are becoming rightfully so concerned about this silent cyber we've been talking about. Basically, if it's not excluded properly, a court somewhere may be able to find the cover. So Willis went out and they did a survey. And they surveyed 750 people, leaders, experts, at 70 different insurance companies around the world. They didn't name any names, but they went out and did this survey. And they got some very interesting results. And they were very, very varied, which I take to believe that just people don't know yet, and there's a lot of unknowns. But they did, by sector, break down what they called their risk factor for silent cyber. So I pulled the one for transportation and shipping. And so what they did was, the way they defined the risk factor was how many cyber-related losses would be involved in a universe of losses for every non-cyber related. And about half the people felt the risk factor was 1.01, or what they mean is they would have one cyber-related loss for every 100 regular losses. More interestingly, though, about 25% of the respondents were at the upper end. They thought it might be 10 cyber losses or 25. There was a few people that even thought you would have 100 cyber losses for every 100 regular losses. That's how they were that concerned that in the future the cyber would be equal to regular man-made or nat cat losses, which is somewhat alarming. But it's a good read, and I would recommend you check it out. To go back to how our industry and marine is doing it, again, this is the standard London CL 380 Institute Cyber Attack Exclusion Clause, which comes from all the way back in 2003. There are questions around how fit for purpose this clause still is today, but it's the one that you'll most likely see in a hull or cargo policy around the world. This is the AIMU clause. It's very tiny. You can barely read it. It goes into a little bit more details, tries to define some things and improve upon the London clause, but as I said, unfortunately, it's being used very, very, very infrequently. When we look at the reinsurance industry, typically we are either will have 380 itself in a treaty, or we are relying upon our clients who have told us that they will put it in every single original policy. And typically, the reinsurance treaties will have something which is called the Joint Excess Loss Committee Information Technology Hazards Clause. And what that one does is that deals with accumulation. As reinsurers, we're often concerned about an accumulation of sideways risks, and this basically does not allow the losses to be aggregated. So our retention would have to be taken each and every time that a cyber loss might happen. So the new bit here, as we said, we're getting some specific write-backs. We're seeing there's one clause called CABI in the energy market. There's other versions of it. Or we're seeing cover go into policies, we think, by deleting exclusions. But what I want to raise to you in the audience today is if you're going to consider writing cyber or not writing cyber, that you make it clear that you either want it in your policy, you want to provide the coverage, you want to underwrite it and provide a premium for it, you want to understand it, or you want to exclude it. And I would just say that pick one and then make it very clear in the policy language. How to underwrite. So at Swiss Re, we have a little advertisement portion of the speech here. There's an excellent Sigma report on cyber risk. They're free outside if you'd like to get it. It's in Spanish. And it's a beginning. So when we think about how do we underwrite this, how do we price such a thing, how do we track the accumulation potential in a systemic event, these are all open questions. I don't have an answer for you right now. And whether or not you have reinsurance cover for it is something else. You may or may not have it, or you may have accumulation language in your reinsurance that would make it difficult to recover. So these are all things that need to be looked at if you're going to provide cyber cover. Let's switch over to the non-marine market for a second. I'm going to update the sort of numbers. The projection for the premium in the property and casualty market, non-marine, was expected to be between $2 and $2.5 billion. And it's right about there. About $2.3 billion was the estimate. There is a reinsurance appetite for this too. About $500 million is flowing through the reinsurers via typically quota shares. Of the specific cyber policies purchased, they're still very much dominated by companies in the United States. Global capacity has gone up, like in many other lines of business, so capacity is up about $50 million to about $500 million any one risk. Risk managers are still concerned about it. The policy wordings are becoming more standardized. There is still very little standardized exclusionary wording, so that's going to be more tailored. Underwriting data, there's still a lack of underwriting data. There's a lot we still don't know. When we talk about the modeling of catastrophic exposures, it's certainly still an issue, but with the amount of hacks that are going on and large events that are happening every single day, that data is improving, and there's more of it, unfortunately. But the space will continue to grow, and this is where opportunity lies. If you want to cover cyber, there's definitely going to be a demand for it. We move? Okay. I'm going to talk from the non-marine market about Merck and not Petya. And I'm also going to quote from the Insider. So in June 2017, Merck was also hit with this not Petya event. As I said, it hit 7,000 companies. Another one of them was Merck. And in some of these companies, not only was it sort of their office systems were hit, but their ability to run their machinery, industrial processes were slowed down by this. So the Insurance Insider had a headline on the 28th that the insurance market would be bracing for a $1 billion to $1.5 billion business interruption claim that would hit the property covers of Merck. Now, I want to make it extremely clear, and the Insider put it in their article also, that Merck completely disavowed that they were making a claim. They didn't say they didn't have an attack, but they said, we have cyber cover that we have bought specifically. We are not going to put a claim into the property, and your sources are wrong. It doesn't matter. What happened was is that this became a wake-up call for many, many, many companies that from the buyers, the insured side, that they may have an exposure here, and then for insurers that they may be providing silent cyber within a property cover. If it's an all-risk cover, they did not exclude cyber causes. There was a physical loss. Those hard drives were broken. They all had to be replaced. So you had physical loss and you had a business interruption. You could have a claim. So in this case, not from Merck, but from any of these other ones. And so it was a big wake-up call, and I think that since this has happened, a lot of insurers are now taking a second look at how they're dealing with the silent cyber issue. And you're going to hear a lot more about that in the future, I think. So let's talk about the future. The change I put here is cyber language in the policies we're still looking at, but I think a lot more work has been done on understanding the risk and understanding the exposure. And that's really where we need to get to if we want to understand this and underwrite this as a business. We need to understand the vulnerabilities. We need to have underwriters that can understand the vulnerabilities and make a rational assessment over who's a good insured, over who's a bad insured. Is this a role for surveyors in the future? Quite possibly. You may not just want to know, is the hull any good, but what are the systems inside the hull? What are the precautions they have to make sure no one is putting in a zip drive or doing email from the bridge that they can somehow open up the ship's systems to a cyber attack. So these are the things we need to continue on. We're still not there. I think it's going to be a while. My concern is that we also don't have a very good, clear path yet to understand this and to underwrite it properly. There's a lot of work to be done. But I will leave you with this one thought, that providing silent cyber cover in any of your policies is not a good option and really needs to be thought about. That concludes it. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you, Mr. Anthony Cowie. Any question? ¿Alguna pregunta? Micrófono, por favor. Micrófono. Inmediatamente después tenemos la ponencia también de responsabilidad civil en Latinoamérica, límites de responsabilidad del transportista marítimo y aéreo. Adelante.
Thank you, sir. Excellent presentation. Very, very interesting. My question is there anything being done to go after the cyber criminals? Surely they are somewhere. Obviously they are very clever, hidden somewhere, but is there any action being taken to go after them and take them to court?
The short answer is no. From what I could see, it's very, very difficult to prosecute these cases. There's a few situations where I think that in Israel, a group was found out and was picked up, and I think there might have been some in the Ukraine. But it's nearly impossible to locate and find these people. They're very good at covering their tracks. There's different bad actors. There's some who are doing it for financial gain, and those are probably easier to catch. Those are the ones that were caught, the ones that were trying to get money because you can trace that. But then there are people who just want to wreak havoc in the world and cause anarchy. Those are near impossible to find. So, yeah, but unfortunately, I think it's high on Governments around the world they wish they could do it, but I don't think they have the wherewithal to police this yet. So.
Thank you.
A question in the back?
Última pregunta, por favor.
Hola. Mi pregunta es muy sencilla. Cuando hablamos del tema de Maersk, ¿sí? Cuando hablamos del tema de Maersk, se habló de... ¿Sí? ¿Me escuchas? ¿No?
No. Don't translate.
When we talk about the Maersk case, we talk about the 3,000... No. How much it was the cost?
Almost 300 million was the top estimate.
But this cost is about only Maersk cost or all the... Because here in Peru we have the problem. The administration of Port of Callao is is part of Maersk. And we have 3 days, the port was without any kind of work.
Right.
But that cost of each, how do you say, importador, okay? This cost nobody have that information.
You're correct. So that 200 to 300 million is Maersk's direct costs only, and you're absolutely right. People were out of work for a few days, supply chain issues, and that's where that, if you remember on the earlier page, the gentleman who was expecting that the real cost of cybercrime is in the trillions of dollars, and that's exactly where it's coming from. So all these longshoremen can't work, they don't get paid, so the true economic cost really could be in the trillions of dollars. Because you have all that evidence. And so you had 76 different ports around the world where people were not working and cargo was not moving, and then you had these logistic issues down the road. Maybe someone didn't get the part they needed, and so everyone in that factory went home too because there was no work, because then this stuff wasn't there. With just-in-time inventory, the ripple effect can be staggering and very expensive. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Anthony Cowie. Un aplauso para él, por favor.